Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie, and I'm here with my husband Jim, and we are on spring break. Yes, we have a whole week off from our day-to-day grind. So what did I do all day yesterday, and what am I doing most of the day today? I am updating our website.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it because, we've added some additional trainings that we're doing. We're doing a little bit more with like small businesses and medium-sized businesses. So I'm adding all of those services in there, and I'm just giving it a new look and feel and updating some of the graphics. And, it's one of those things that it really needed to be done. And so I'm on spring break from my day job at the school and decided to use that time to we're replacing a window on our house that was built in 1903.
And if you don't paint something, life is not complete. So you have to paint something.
I have to paint something. And then I'm headed, at the end of the spring break, I'm headed to Liberty Hill for a few days to paint our upcoming grandbaby's nursery. So our first grandchild is going to get here in July, and I'm going to go paint a nursery. So I haven't found a way to get artificial intelligence to paint walls yet.
Now, maybe robots someday will paint walls, but they'll never do it to your satisfaction. So it won't matter anyway.
Never, ever. So let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. That's what we always do. As I said, my name is Maurie. I'm here with Jim. We do this once a week. We're actually getting some followers on our podcast, which is awesome, more than what we used to have.
Don't forget we're on YouTube as well.
And the thing that we're doing now, our probably future daughter-in-law, I would think probably, her and our youngest have been together for some time. She's a very, very, very sweet girl, convinced us that we needed to video while we were doing this and not just do audio. And so it's a little different because now it's like, oh no, like, look, I've got my tech shirt on. I've got my little Capital Factory.
Got mine on too.
Yours is really funny. It says come and tech it. And it's like a flash drive. It's pretty funny. They bought that for you at the TCA conference. And then mine's a little robot with a little lasso. So, if you're not watching the video, maybe you should. You can see that we are actual people. We're not AI generated. Jim, what are you looking at behind me?
I think I'm hallucinating. I swear I see a little flashing thing underneath my yellow things in the background.
Oh my God. Okay, so let's not talk about that.
Jim's hallucinating today.
Jim's hallucinating. You are not an AI, so hopefully you're not going to start hallucinating like some of them do. Let's talk a little bit about what's been going on. We went to the Dell facility last week. Did a
Executive
Dell
Training
Center. It was beautiful. We can't talk about what they talked about because we did sign an NDA, but the food was good.
Right? I'm not going to make a comment just because you gave me such a hard time about it's not my fault they had a dessert bar.
Okay. So what's really funny is that, yes, we had our names on our name tags, but a lot of people don't really pay attention to names on name tags. And so there were several people in the room, and we're sitting there, and you got yourself a small, like, punch cup halfway full of M&Ms, and you sat there and you were eating these M&Ms, which first of all, it was kind of loud because, whenever you dig into the little punch cup, it would make noise, but everyone would notice that every so often I would like reach over and push them away from you, and you would kind of look at me, give me a little stink eye, and then pull them back towards you, and they didn't realize that we were married.
No, it took a while, actually. It was about halfway through the day before they went, oh, wait a minute, I get it. You two are together.
Yeah, so it was kind of funny because they just thought that I was some annoying person sitting next to you and kept pushing your
M&Ms. You were
M&Ms.
annoying, but between the dessert buffet and the dessert and the candy bar, I had a carb overload.
You did have a carb overload, and you crashed pretty severely that evening when we got home.
It was so good.
Let's talk about what's going on in the world of AI when it comes to the headlines.
Hold on. One thing we didn't mention, though, but we can talk about one thing we did when we were at the Dell Executive Training Center.
Okay.
We talked about AI stuff.
Yeah.
There's a big shock. There's a big shock.
That's a big shock.
I wouldn't have went otherwise. So
Yeah, it was good. It was a nice day. And, when you live out in the rural area and you get Chick-fil-A on the way home, that's
Hey, that was a
even
treat.
better.
We drove all
That
the
was
way. We took a 20-minute
20-minute
side trip
detour.
just so we could stop at Chick-fil-A.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about what's going on. OpenAI and Google have both asked our government to let them train their AI on content that they do not own. So they're saying that it's so that they can avoid like forfeiting our AI lead over to China.
That's
So,
funny. You know how they're going to do that, right? You know what they're trying to do, right?
well, they're trying to get all the information that the
No, I
government
mean as
has.
in literally how they're trying to what they're trying to do.
Explain it.
Ever since the United States we created a patent system which I think has been around for a couple hundred years. The Defense Department, once it was created, they've always had a key to the back door, is what everybody I mean, you can literally patent something and they can declare it a national interest and or national security, and they can take your patent away from you effectively. You still get the patent, but you don't get paid anything because it becomes confidential, top secret, and they just take it basically. And if they're a nice government, which they're probably not, because I've never had that happen to me, but they don't have to pay you anything if it's in the best of that. So they're basically trying to use that. I'm guessing they're trying to use that same idea is, we have to declare that all the stuff the New York Times owns and all the library books and everything that's written out there they should be allowed to use it for training for free because it's in the interest of national security. That is the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard.
Well, and another thing that I thought was kind of interesting is it a coincidence that they're saying that they need to do this so that they compete with other countries like China for data? Is it a coincidence that they're coming out and saying we need this information? Or is it not a coincidence that our current political climate has a person who has access to a lot of information?
All of it. Pretty much everything that's the government owns about us is accessible, and that particular individual actually has one of the larger AI models and 100,000 GPUs he can train on them, and that particular group is proposing to replace federal employees with AI. Now, to do that, you got to have data to train it on. So all these guys are going, wow, $200 million, and he got access to the entire information resources of the United States of America, all the people in it, all the government, everything. He gets access to it. Right. They're probably going, hey, that's not fair. So here, let's try another thing. Let's get our access through.
If they would have known, they would have put some money into the political campaign and
apparently they should have done a better job. I'm not going to get into politics, and I don't agree with a lot of what's going on in politics, but I can tell you that the one thing that I am adamantly opposed to is an individual who owns a private company be having access to every piece of healthcare information, of statistics, every single thing the government collects on us being trained into his AI without us having any say-so, no privacy, no nothing. It's bad enough that these tools that are out there now trained on people's information for free. Okay, I understand why they did it because everything was free at the time, but it's just not right for him to have access to all that information.
I agree. It's one of those things like,
and neither should they, by the way.
Well, if I post something on Facebook about information on social media, I am under the impression that I am just sharing that information for free, which, a lot of people came back and said, well, yes, I wrote that article and yes, I did post it on a public media, but you need to pay me. Well, bullshit. You put it out there for everybody to see. And now that somebody is benefiting from what you showed them, you're wanting to be paid. No, that's not.
Well, I mean, you can say they're saying it's fair use. They want it under the fair use policy is what they're saying, but I think they wanted to get it declared a national emergency or something like that, because then you can do it under the auspice of the federal government. and what's best for the nation kind of thing.
Well, that's what I was going to say. When I put something out there on a social media platform to share, I'm doing that because I know other people are going to read it. But something that they have on me from like, I don't know, a
medical
test
procedure,
result or a vaccination or a procedure or something that should be private, and I assumed it was going to stay private. Now we're getting into that area to where it's like, wait a second, I didn't just put that out there to share, but you still have access. So something's wrong with that.
Yeah,
so,
I don't agree with what they're trying to do, because they're trying to say that, I mean, these people make a living on their information, and for them to say we should be able to train on it and then reuse it for free, that's I don't think the federal, I don't think it's wrong. I think it's illegal, and I don't think they can make it legal by using fancy terms and stuff. And I love OpenAI, I love AI, I love language models, I love Google's. Well, I don't love Google's that much, but I like it okay. But that particular thing's like, no, guys, if that's the only way you're going to make money is to do that, then you need to figure out a different model.
I agree. Let's move on to the next one. There is a new thing out called Sesame. It's a startup behind a viral virtual assistant whose named is Maya.
There's actually two now. There's Miles and Maya, I think.
Miles and Maya, okay. So it's a base AI model, and we actually played with this the other day. It is a voice model that is amazing. I mean, tell me a little bit about it. I was impressed.
It's we call them a voice-to-voice pipeline, which basically says when you're doing AI voice stuff, you can do text to speech, which means you type it and it says it, or you can do speech to text, text to speech in a single pipeline, because it's not done in a single step. It's still multi-step. It's just behind the scenes. So they've got the full voice-to-voice pipeline. What's cool about it is it's incredibly lifelike, which we've seen those before. Pi was really, I mean, Pi's been out for 2 years, and it was incredible. OpenAI did their interruptible model, because I love interrupting things, and they did their interruptible model, and that was fantastic. But this one, it just felt not only smoother, but when you walk, we had all three of us standing around my computer because I was showing someone, and you walked up, and I said, "Say hello to Toby," and it went, "Hey, Toby, how are you?" And then I said something to you. I didn't really test whether or not it could differentiate the voices. In other words, if you would have talked, would it have said, "Hey, hey, Maurie, what's on your mind," kind of thing? Would it have? I didn't test that, so I don't know if it can. The thing that got me excited, though, was the fact that we've got a voice-to-voice pipeline we're putting in Agnes, because we have privacy and cost and all that other stuff. And when they first coming out with this, they specifically said they were going to open source the model. What does that mean? That means they put it on GitHub. You can download it. You can use it for whatever you want. And in this case, I'm reading, they didn't put the guardrails up. One guy said he was able to clone his own voice in about 5 minutes, which the previous model that we played with Agnes, I cloned your voice, I cloned mine. Mine was terrible. Yours was really good because you articulate better than I do, I think. It doesn't really matter what the reason was. This is supposed to be a lot better. So Agnes is about to sound a lot like you, because I have all
something to look forward to.
I have all this data, all these YouTube videos and stuff I can use for training. There you go.
Okay, well, it's something I have a feeling that
we're
going to play with this.
I'm not gonna pay you for training it on your voice. I'm just gonna take all your data and use it.
Oh, Jim, we've been married for 38 years. You will continue to pay me.
I'm paying.
You've been paying for a long time, and you will continue to do so.
And you know what? It's worth every penny.
Well, I'm glad you think so.
I do.
So let's talk about the Model Context Protocol, MCP. I know it was mentioned to somebody who is supposedly an AI expert, and they argued with you for just a little bit about when it was actually released. The reason, I think, is because it was released by Anthropic back in November, which, that's several months ago, but it really didn't start getting talked about until a week or so ago. Now, I like the way that you explained this to me. The Model Context Protocol, or MCP again, it's a standard, right? Kind of like the standard for shipping container size, so that everything was standardized for the railways. The standard for USB, whenever you plug in something into your computer, it's a standardized
better analogy, port. A better example is what you do at work.
It is one roster. It's a standard. I mean, back in the day, before
not long ago,
whenever I would collect data, I would have to go into our system and I would have to download CSV files, and then I was constantly having to rearrange columns and rename headers and put things in specific order. Like every single company out there had their very own template that I would have to put all my information into their template and then feed them the information for them to be able to upload it into their system. Well, one roster came out, and it's a standardization, and it made life a lot easier. So,
Well, the main thing is when you start talking about AI agents, what is an agent? An agent is an AI that can act on its own and it can actually make decisions without your intervention. You can ask it to get your final approval from you, but think of it like an assistant in your office. What does that mean? Well, anytime you're doing something, like, for example, you wanted to book a flight, that's the easiest one that anybody can pretty much visualize. A travel agent, I'm sorry, travel agents out there, but your time is probably limited. The travel agent's idea is I need to call hotels. I need to get, places, cars rentals. I got all these details, and those take access to tools in this case being websites, hotel websites, whatever. When you do all of that stuff, you have the same problem you had with the data that was coming out of our student information system. You had to format it, you had to privatize it, or whatever it is you had to do to it before you could then ship it to wherever it was going. Well, they have the same problem. Well, that makes writing these tools, whether they're no code tool, you're using no code or coding, either way, you have to write everything separately. When you standardize on a particular way of doing it, that means you do it once, and there's already the no-code tool I use is called N8N, and in it there's already an MCP server that you can, it's a node that you can put in there. You can create a back-end MCP server where every AI agent that needs access to tools goes there and says, hey, what tools you got? I need to do this, and it answers you back. That's why it's so important. I know it's kind of boring for most people, but when you start talking about using these things for useful stuff, this is the kind of stuff that makes all the difference in the world.
right. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about what's been going on, like on LinkedIn.
Well, specifically, we're going to talk about your article. You wrote an article. You got a lot of attention. We won't go into the actual stats on it, but it really seems to have kind of struck a chord with people, which in my mind means that somehow they're identifying with it on a personal level. So I'd like you to give us kind of a 1-minute overview of what was it and why do you think it got attention?
Well, I wrote a Medium article about control. And I think the reason I did it is because in public education, we are getting ready to start, we're STAR testing here in Texas. Those high stakes tests that the state of Texas has coming up. And so the closer we get to STAR testing, I've been going over to my AI Trailblazers classrooms once a week. And lately, when I go over, we're not doing anything in the classroom other than drill and kill. They're benchmarking and they're testing and they're testing and they're testing, and they are the whole dynamic is shifting as it gets closer and closer to the test because of the stress that
stress levels going up and the variety is going down.
Up. Right. And so it just kind of struck me. I was over there the other day and I'm like, golly, this is just, it's all about control, how they're feeling out of control because of this looming test. And so therefore they're doubling down on what they can control, which that is human nature. And so it kind of brought me back to the day where I will brag on myself, which I don't do very often, but I'm going to do it this time. I got a master's degree. And when I did, I was very happy because up until the very last class I took, I had a 4.0 for my master's degree. But that very last class had a large writing component, which was fine. But I kept getting dinged on my APA formatting. 6th edition, American Psychological Association, APA, and it's about how you cite your sources. And this professor would count off points if I didn't have a comma in my bibliography section of my papers. And I ended up making a B in that class because, frankly, after like the second or third paper, getting 10 points taken off because of my sources and not because of the information that was in my paper, I was like, F it, I'll take the B. It wasn't worth the effort at the time for me to go back and double, triple check the way that I was putting my source information in. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this is ridiculous. And so I started kind of thinking about it. You and I taught our kids before they went to college, or even when they were in high school, we would tell them, if your teacher tells you that the moon is made of cheese, then as far as you're concerned on that test, that's that answer. We were really doing a disservice to our kids by telling them that.
Yeah, but we knew the rules. I mean,
we knew the rules.
What was the difference between, what is that? Is that Maggie walking back there? That is she has the loudest toenails.
I know.
What was the difference between Rachel getting a $20,000 scholarship versus not?
A tenth of a point.
Exactly, a tenth of a point. She made a B in one class instead of, she didn't make any Bs. She made a 90 instead of a 94 in a class or something like that. And she put her a tenth it was like a hundredth of a point below the valedictorian.
Right.
And because of that, she was a salutatorian, which means she got almost no money. Whereas they got their first year of college paid for. So if you don't think that makes everything high stress, high tech, I don't agree with it. I don't think that should be what's important. But moving on we can go on and I can tell you great stories about control stuff too. What I want to know is what does this have to do with AI?
Well, I think that right now in education, they're saying AI is making them lose more control. And so there's this huge pushback about artificial intelligence. And there's words like, it's taking away critical thinking. It's taking away, kids are cheating. It's making it too easy for kids. And if you really, really dig into it, which I did before I wrote the article, I did some deep research and I pulled up a whole bunch of sources about the stress that kids are under when they're so tightly bound. It's detrimental to their education. And so that's the main reason I wrote the article, is because artificial intelligence is out there, but the teachers are panicked about it, not necessarily because of what it can and cannot do, but because they see it as another way that they don't have control over something.
Yeah, and they're being held accountable for test scores, and they feel like if they don't,
class sizes are huge.
If they don't have the controls in place like they're used to, then they can't guarantee the test scores. It's sort of like the difference between somebody that's background is in accounting, running a company, and somebody whose background is in design, technology, whatever. Your perspective is different. An accountant tends to focus very heavily on predictability. Their spreadsheets, they're held accountable, no pun intended, for the fact that if their numbers are down or whatever. So when you understand numbers, you look at it and go, I saw this when I worked at Dell. If we put out a new PC, they had a formula that said if you add memory, you add a faster processor, add whatever, you're going to sell this many the first month, the second month, whatever. What they hated was anything that broke that train. Like if you came out with a completely different idea, they're like, that is unpredictable. That is bad. And therefore everything was that we did when I was there. And don't get me wrong, I love working at Dell. It was a great company back then, but it still was very, very vanilla. They did not like to get away from that. And I think that's the concern, is they lose the predictability. And I think the concern that I have with what testing actually does is the one thing I think it destroys, because I saw it with my own kids, is love of learning. And I'm a believer, maybe not everybody is, but I'm a believer that you learn the best when you love what you're doing. And if you go to school and day after day after day you're doing something unpleasant, school becomes work, it becomes torture, it becomes whatever you want to call it. But what it doesn't become is a place you love to learn. And it hasn't always been that way.
Well, it hasn't always been that way. And that's why some of the big things that we're having issues with are the chronic absenteeism.
Yes, those are the big four issues, all that stuff.
Concerns. Right.
All that stuff, I think.
don't want to be there. They just do not want to be there.
So anyway, I think that's why your article struck a chord that got so much attention. I also think that you're correct. I think all it did was articulate or point out. I don't think it's making the problem worse. I think it's letting it, the same thing we talk about all the time. AI is doing something, making us do something we should have been doing all along, which is talking about
having to rethink.
we're having to rethink it.
We're not having to rethink education. We are needing to rethink education.
Yeah. You said something about China.
I did a post today, and I found an article about how they're now making it mandatory in Beijing or in China for them to teach 8 hours a year to primary education, like kindergarten, first, second grade, 8 hours a year about artificial intelligence, which 8 hours a year is not. It's not enough at all, but it's 8 times more than what we have here in the United States as being mandatory. Right now, AI is an option for everything. And we are not going to be able to compete if we don't take this seriously and start training our youngest learners on how to utilize it as a tool, not as a crutch, not as a replacement, but something they can have as a helper in their education. We talked about it the other day. Our daughter, salutatorian, question. She was born asking why, and she really wanted knowledge. She really wanted information. And by the time she was in the 2nd or 3rd grade, her teachers had started shutting her down. Literally, she would come home crying because her teacher had told her she could only ask 1 question in a day. And so I'm sitting here looking at her and going, okay, angry at the teacher? Yes. But I was a teacher. I understand. They're up to their ass in alligators. They have 24 kids. Rachel's asking 12 questions every single time they have a new lesson. They don't have time to answer all of her questions and still stay on track to get whatever they needed to cover for that day covered. But if Rachel would have had an AI sitting there, if she could have came home and asked all of those questions to an AI, because believe me, I didn't know the answers for what she was asking, she would have just thrived in that environment. So we've got to address this, people, policymakers, government leaders. We've got to start putting this in our educational system. And what's going to happen is if we don't do it in public education, they're going to do it in private education. And then those students are going to have a leg up over anyone that's educated in the public system. And, now in the state of Texas, we have our vouchers and everything that are going to be coming to where you can take your kid out of a public school and get money and then put them into a private school. But you're not going to be able to afford it. So you're going to have to get a student loan for your kindergartner.
Okay, you're going off the rails. Maybe going off the rails. You're going off the rails.
I'm so passionate about this because what's going to happen is rural America is going to be left with nothing. We're going to be left with
very difficult situation, underfunded situation. So before we're going to run out of time, and you're ranting today, not me. So I just want you to note that.
Oh my goodness, I
put in a thing there
I'm
about
take a drink of coffee and calm the hell down.
No kidding. I put a thing in there about what I call vibe coding, which was another headline that's been going on. I mean, it's in the AI, blogosphere or whatever you want to call it, all the last couple of weeks. So I put in there just for you. I put in there what the definition was because you're going, what the heck is vibe coding and why do I care? So what it is a term that was coined by Andrew Karpathy. He was the co-founder of OpenAI. He was an AI leader at Tesla. Basically, it's not anything new. He just gave it a new term. It's basically what I do all the time. Instead of trying to write code, you let the AI write the code, but you talk to the AI about what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, so you have to know enough about AI. You have to know enough about AI, and you have to know enough about coding to be able to vibe with it.
But the point isn't what you know about either one of those. The point is that you don't have to be an expert in either.
Correct.
Supposedly. Now, we're not going to get into we don't have the time because you went on a rant about how why that's it's impossible right now to do that without knowing something about coding. But what I wanted to talk about is why does anyone care about the whole idea of vibe coding? because, and this was a quote I read somewhere, the world's expectations for the next generation are changing rapidly. Formal education wants to have a place in that world. They're not only going to have to adapt, but build a framework for educating that builds the adaptation to change into the process. So, which is basically what you were saying a second ago. You either change or you get left behind is the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And the vibe coding, I've been writing code for a long time. I used to do it full time for a living for 20 years as an engineer. And I can tell you that when I use AI, I tackle things that I couldn't have tackled before. But
I do too.
When I was looking at your article and some of the comments people were making, one of them that stuck out to me was maintain the integrity of education in a world that's constantly, they were talking about just maintaining the integrity of education. I add into that this in a constantly shifting world. And I think we've been taught since the day we first did training for people, we talked about the importance of critical thinking and clearly articulating your thoughts. That's not new. I've heard that long before AI came along. We were complaining about how kids, they can't think anymore, they can't write anymore, all they want to do is social media, yada. AI did not do anything with that other than give another tool for them to be able to avoid doing what they're not enjoying doing. Right. So how do you do that? Well, now AI doesn't eliminate the need for teaching those skills, does it?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, and that's something I think, again, it's one of those things that we should have been talking about. Do you remember when Rachel was at UT Computer Science and she was getting ready to start applying for jobs?
Yeah.
Some of the people that she was up against, it wasn't their credentials that were getting them noticed. It was their ranking for what they called hacker rank.
Correct.
Right?
There's a couple of variations of hacker rank, but yes.
And so when you talk about not having to be an expert in anything, and you talk about, it's just, there's so many different ways to get where you need to go. And, being able to think outside the box is very important. But that integrity of education should have been talked about a long time ago, because Rachel was from a major university, a huge computer science program that was very, very difficult to get in and very, very difficult to graduate from. And that would be what I would think you would put that in the bucket and call that an education, that, the integrity of the educational system right there. But then you had a kid who was coming in that was not in a very hard program necessarily, but was really, really good at hacker rank, that was beating out for interviews.
They were getting hired.
And they were getting hired from an institution that might not have had an integrity of education.
Well, it wasn't an institution at all. It was a boot camp.
Right. So again, AI is not the issue here. AI is actually what is causing us to have discussions we should have had a long time ago.
Yeah, and it's also...
Before we get... Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is everybody's learning style is different. And I think when you integrate AI into the discussion, into the framework, and you allow people to play with ideas, which is how I like to learn, I like the idea that I can take an AI and I can just kind of go over and play around until I get to the point where I feel comfortable with it before I then actually try. I've learned enough by that time that when I actually am formally trying to learn a little bit more about it, I've got a really good feel for the boundaries of it. It lets me play with the boundaries of something new. I do a lot with technology, but I don't think that just applies to technology. I think if you're writing a book, you write drafts of the book. But if you can do that stuff faster and play with ideas faster, it allows you to get to where you want to be and kind of eliminate what did Edison say? I didn't fail 1,000 times. I just found 1,000 ways not to build a light bulb.
Right. I mean, right now, I used AI all day yesterday on the revamping of our website. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it helped. But it's funny because one of the things that I discussed with it the most was the images that I am replacing. What's visually appealing? Should it have more negative space? Should it have this type of font? Should it have, and just that back and forth with the AI makes me feel more confident in what I'm putting out there. But It didn't replace my ideas. It just helped me hone what I was trying to get at myself, you know?
Okay.
So before we leave,
I left that quote down there for you. I want you to read it.
it's
That
a
was
great
just for
quote,
you.
actually. I love this quote that you just said to me. I'm probably going to take this and I'm going to put it on our website. So Albert Einstein said, education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. One of the things that I said in an article that I did was that kids have been memorizing and regurgitating information for a very long time and then just dumping that knowledge after they walk out of the test, right?
Yeah.
Those are the ones that trained themselves to learn something just long enough to pass a test.
I've done it.
So I've done it. And so it's the mind to think is what's the most important part of education.
Okay.
The critical thinking piece is very important. Thinking outside the box, very important.
Okay,
So
we got to
we
wrap
just have
up.
to sit down and have serious conversations about how to do this, how to make these changes. I see it.
Include us in the conversation, by the way, because
Well,
Jim wants to retire
all the time,
someday.
Article after article after article, and I really, really try not to be the one that's just throwing stuff out there to complain about. Solutions. You used to say it all the time. We were in the private sector for a long time, and people would walk into our office and want to complain about something. And the first thing we would say is, okay, what's the solution? So
Call us and we'll help.
I think it's time for people to stop complaining about what they think AI is doing and start providing solutions. Might not be the best solution, might not be the right solution, but at least have something to start pointing us in a different direction. So if we are over on time, I think we need to have guests more often because it kind of keeps us more on track. I am sorry that I am the one that ranted today.
It's not my fault today.
Actually felt kind of good. I haven't ranted in a while. But anyway, my name is Maurie. I'm here with my husband, Jim. We have this podcast. We love to talk about artificial intelligence, but also we do training in schools, school districts, businesses, universities. We're
Cities.
Hudson Tillotson.
Cities.
We've been at a couple of cities now. We're going to be at Hudson Tillotson in April. We're going to be at SequoiaCon in April. And then we're headed to San Diego to the ASU GSV AI Air Show. We're going to be on the innovator floor talking about Agnes. You guys visit our website at www.aiedpro to get more information. I've almost done having it completely revamped. I'm doing a little bit at a time. So we hope that you guys have a marvelous rest of the week.